that are zooming in with us this morning. Want to say good morning to everyone. Want to say thank you for being a part of coming on and being a part of our Black History celebration for the city. We haven't done this in several years. I remember a few years back, we did it every year, but it's been a few years this time. And I want to introduce, before I go further, Council Member Brian Jones Chance is right below Pastor Waddles. Council Member Mr. Chance. There's former Mayor George Goodman. We have Pastor Waddles with us, and we also have Mrs. Pat Horn McGee and Mr. Herbert Francois II and Crystal Harding. Okay, and I see Mayor Pro Tem Brown is letting us see her smile. So, well, you just heard me introduce everybody. So I want us all to know who's who. And we're going to not delay, but we're going to go on and get started. And I asked Pastor Waddles to join us this morning for prayer. I had put the program together and all of a sudden it hit me. Lois, you can't have a Black History program without prayer. You know, that's who we are. So I called Pastor Waddles yesterday, and he graciously agreed to join us this morning. So Pastor Waddles, please.
Father in heaven, how we thank you for our mutual gathering and those who are online with us today as we reflect on our history for the purpose of being informed on our future. We pray your blessings upon this program in our city and all those who are participating, that your will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Amen. Okay, and we're going to now have the Lift Every Voice and Sing with Miss Harding and her Ypsilanti High School choir. So, Mr. Halinga.
I don't have any song.
We're not hearing. Okay. I'm sorry. What's going on? Let me call him.
Ypsilanti, to reach the clerk treasurer's office.
Hi, Mary. He's currently working on the sound now.
Every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, bright as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
Wow. Thank you. And I want to say that, congratulations to Crystal. Thank you so very much. That was beautiful. And to think that they did all of that while they were actually not together, correct?
That is correct. Not
Yes.
some of the participants. That video was YCHS choir, Ypsilanti High School choir, and friends. And we had contributors from all over the country in that video. So no, we weren't together at all. Together.
Okay. And she invited me to join, but it wouldn't have sounded like that if I. So, if you want me to come on with the choir and read something, I will. I'll do that. Okay. All right. We're now going to start with our speakers. And on the program, I had Mayor George coming first, but due to his schedule, Mr. Francois asked if he could start us off. And the program today is just going to be, I've invited the speakers to share Ypsilanti back in the days that we were all a lot younger than we are now. And to share what we remember, to share what things are like. And I asked the mayor to share on the political side, the leaders that were with the city and those that were elected officials. Mr. William Paul Clay was invited. However, he had to go up north and he said he wasn't sure exactly what his internet connection would be like. So I didn't hear from him. So I'm thinking that evidently he had no service. So Mr. Francois, please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay, we can't see you. Are you going to let us see you? While you
Okay, let me work with this technology here.
Okay.
Did that get it?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
That's it. All right.
You're on.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Good morning, Mayor Richardson, fellow panelists, viewers, and listeners. My name is Herb Francois. I'm a longtime resident of Ypsilanti. I'm going to talk a little bit about urban renewal in Ypsilanti and contributions by my father, Herbert W. Francois Sr., and other leaders in the community. In order to talk about urban renewal, let me first give some brief context. Urban renewal was the federal government's effort to revitalize aging and decaying inner cities. Under this program, the federal government would give local governments money to demolish and construct new housing. Just before urban renewal came about, Ypsilanti had seen an increase in the number of businesses and families on and around Harriet Street due to the huge migration of Blacks from the South after the war. As we know, due to discriminatory housing practices and segregation, the South side of Ypsilanti is where the majority of Ypsilanti's Black residents lived. In 1952, the city applied for preliminary funding for an urban renewal project. This initial plan was to redevelop a different area than what was finally decided on by the city council in 1961. I don't know why, but for whatever reason, the city abandoned this first plan. It wasn't until after the Housing Act of 1954 that the city started to rethink its urban renewal plan. To qualify for this plan, there were certain requirements. You had to have a minimum of 20% of the dwellings needed to be deemed deteriorated. The city wanted to find a concentrated area that met this criteria. So the city stayed focused on the South side. It also appears that the city restarted its urban renewal planning and focused on the South side because the Housing Act of 1954 provided the city new ways to fund its urban renewal plan. Essentially, the new law allowed cities to use existing new construction or infrastructure development projects to count towards the city's share in the cost of the urban renewal project. What this meant for Ypsilanti was that it could leverage the construction of East Junior High School and other developments to count towards the city's share of the urban renewal project. In 1961, the city approved its plan to redevelop Park Ridge community area. This area included boundaries from Harriet to Watling and from Huron to 2nd Avenue. This area would require the least amount of the city's local funds because of the development of East Junior High School. Like in many cities across America, urban renewal in Ypsilanti left many families without homes. Residents could not afford the homes and/or could not get mortgages due to discriminatory lending practices by banks, and they could not move in other parts of the city because of legal segregation. So relocating displaced families became a problem. It became an issue, a large issue. But lo and behold, this is where my dad, Herbert W. Francois Sr., and other community leaders left their mark on the urban renewal planning in Ypsilanti. At the time of urban renewal, my dad had made a name for himself as a formidable businessman, realtor, activist, and newspaper publisher. In addition to being a realtor, he owned and published the Washtenaw Sun newspaper and helped establish the Ypsilanti Ann Arbor Ypsilanti Willow Run chapter of NAACP, serving as its first president and delegate to the National Convention. There were residents on both sides of this urban renewal issue, but my dad supported urban renewal, along with other Black businessmen, clergy, and elected officials. To name a few, Lance Forbes, Jesse Rutherford, Reverend Reeves, Amos Washington, and the former mayor, John Burton. I suspect that my dad and others supported urban renewal for a number of reasons, but I think they were all in concert with two main reasons: improving conditions for Black people, with the idea that federal money could infuse business in the community. During this time, my dad was a member of Brown Chapel AME Church and the Ypsilanti Business Professional League. These two organizations, along with the Detroit-based group, developed the property we know today as Parkview Apartments on Harriet Street, now Hamilton Crossing. This was in response to the housing needed by so many families displaced by the city's urban renewal plans. This was in response to the housing needed by so many families displaced by the city's urban renewal plans. My dad was instrumental in getting the financing and pulling together the various pieces needed to build the 144 units at Parkview. My mom would sometimes say he's up and down the highway to Detroit talking to federal and state officials about this Federal Housing Act. I remember the many meetings they used to have at our home, the three groups, to make this happen. My dad at one time purchased a few or maybe several of the homes that were planned for demolition and relocated them to other parts of the city out of the urban renewal area and renovated these structures and offered them to people who were displaced. All in all, urban renewal has a storied and controversial history in Ypsilanti. But I think the heart of the matter remains that urban renewal was not about destruction of Harriet Street businesses. Urban renewal was a legal scheme to redevelop residential areas that the local government had determined to be blighted. government had to make those claims in order to get federal funding to start the process of urban renewal. I'm glad to have had this opportunity to share what I know, including my family's involvement in the development of the Black community. Thank you, Mayor Richardson and others.
Thank you, Mr. Francois. And we know that you said you would stay on with us as long as you could. And the plan is to hear from all three speakers, and then after hearing from Ms. Martin, we would have a conversation between the speakers that are still here. So right now, if we could hear from, thank you again, Mr. Francois, if we could hear from Mayor Goodman. You want to just talk to us about things that we talked about, talking about the leaders and the former political people in the city, Blacks, and also we're going to have a conversation later on about what is now called the South Side. I don't ever remember it being called that when we grew up, but anyway, Mr. Goodman, Mayor Goodman.
Thank you, Lois. It's good to be a part of the panel. It's also good to be kind of back to my hometown. One of the biggest honors that a person can have, I think, certainly Lois, you appreciate that, is to be a local elected official, and particularly having the opportunity to be the mayor of your hometown. When one is in the kindergarten and third, fourth, and fifth grade, you never think of those things, right. But ultimately it came to pass. I want to, before I get into the other dimension of what I was going to comment on, it probably be useful in terms of the transition for me to pick up on a couple of observations that Herb made, and that is, in terms of urban renewal, in sort of an interesting way, the year that John F. Kennedy was assassinated, which I believe is in 1963 in November, I was sitting with my parents in the urban renewal office on Madison Street, finalizing the plans for the urban renewal program to purchase my parents' building and business, which was located on Harriet Street. My parents built a store on Harriet Street called Goodman's Fashion Center in about 1948, I believe, or 49. And it was through the urban renewal effort that they ultimately decided that it was time for them to retire and move on. And unfortunately, all of those records that the city had at the time, to this date, I've not been able to locate any photographs of any of it, but I have discovered some invoices that my parents had in some files that sort of documented the value that the government placed on their properties, their, all the items that they had available and so forth. The other point that I would make, which Herbert also referred to, had to do with the early discrimination, and this obviously precedes the urban renewal program. My parents were not able to get a loan from the Ypsilanti Savings Bank to build their store. They literally had to sort of bootstrap it in terms of buying the materials, and save a little bit money and then buy more. It was stored on the properties. And then when they got enough of the materials ready to start the construction, that's when they brought in some people to help them. And sort of in an ironic way, the old Ypsilanti Savings Bank is now where the City Hall is located. And I'll talk a little bit about that sort of in another dimension here. I just wanted to say too, Herbert is correct. Urban renewal was not universally viewed as a success or even wanted in the community. Some of you that have been around as long as Herbert and I and Lois remember that Mrs. Dorsey was one of the primary opponents of urban renewal. And bless her heart, she fought a good fight. She ultimately ran for city council and served on the council during the early part of my tenure as mayor. I ran for the city council the first time in 1969. I lost by 150 votes. At that time, the council ran at large. And so John Burton preceded me on the city council. John Burton also has the distinction of being the first African-American mayor of the city of Ypsilanti. He was elected by the council. Now, keep in mind, when we're talking history, we're also talking about the fact that he had been on the city council for over 20 years before he was finally elected mayor, because the mayors, you know, they get selected from their own ranks. When I ran in 1969, there was 2 or 3 controversial issues, but one of the big controversial issues at that time was an infrastructure project called Huron River Drive. And the big controversy had to do with whether Huron River Drive was going to have a boulevard down the center of it. And the people that opposed it ended up winning. And then they ended up asking the city manager to resign. The new majority at that time sort of came in and started making whatever changes were necessary. In 1970, it was time for another council election. And some of the people that had supported me when I ran in 1969 asked if I'd be willing to do it again. Well, you know, you sort of give second thoughts, and it didn't take me a long time to decide that, well, yeah, I think maybe I'll try it again. So the second time I ran for city council, I won. I was the top vote getter in the entire community. And in 1972, I still had to run for re-election as a council member because at that time the council terms were sort of staggered. So I was elected mayor pro tem by the council. And then in 1973, there was a move underfoot to change the charter. And Lois has been through that, I think, either once or twice since she's been involved in the council. The charter was then changed, which required the mayor to be elected at large, and then all the other members of the council were elected by their wards. When I was elected the first time, we had 7 council members. After the charter was changed, we went to 5 wards, and the mayor was elected at large. So I was mayor from 1972 until 1983. Well, technically, the end of 1982, when I resigned my position when I took over as executive director of the Michigan Municipal League. Several of the other people that served with me on the city council, and I'm sorry he's not with us today, is Paul Clay, commonly referred to as Toady, from a very delightful, well-known family in the town. Norman Kennedy, who has recently passed away, served on the council with me. Doug Harris. Mrs. Dorsey, as I mentioned earlier, served on the council. Al Robinson, Eula Booker, who has also passed away. Johnny Bass served on the council. As a side note, when I was a youngster in town, I was the bat boy for the Thorn Tire Company baseball team. Johnny Bass was the pitcher, and he was the best pitcher that they had.
Yes, he was.
And I didn't go, I wasn't allowed to travel out of town with them, but every time they played, it was at Rec Park. And I was there. It was always a joy to run out and grab the bats and stuff, and put them where they were supposed to be. Sam Bass. In terms of city officials, Jimmy Moore became our police chief. L.J. McGowan also became the police chief. I know Pat Horn and Lois will remember, and Herbert, Charles White had a top position in the DPW department for the city of Ypsilanti. And the other person that we brought into the city was a young lady named Regina Williams. And Regina was a CETA employee. That was, again, a federal program that provided funds to communities to hire workers who would be assigned to different positions within the local unit of government. Regina left Ypsilanti, continued on moving up through the ranks. She became a city manager. She was a city manager out in California for a while. She was a city manager in Virginia. She's now retired. We kind of stay in touch from time to time, but she got her initial roots, so to speak, in terms of the management profession from the city of Ypsilanti. Many of the structures that you see now in the city were all built during the time that myself and several of us were politically active in town. The senior citizen structures that you see in town, the high rise there at the corner of Michigan and Hamilton, the one on Chittister Street, several of the new bridges, the current fire department, and as I mentioned earlier, the Ypsilanti Savings Bank. When I was first elected mayor, the council was down at the, what's the name of it? The
Ladies Literary House.
Starkweather's Mansion, Starkweather, wasn't it?
The
No,
what?
it's
Mansion.
down on the one on Huron
Huron.
Street.
Huron and Cross Street, right?
It was
Right.
a ladies' library. I think that's what it's called.
Anyway,
There,
there
yeah.
was a big move at that time because we were literally outgrowing the facility. So there was a move underway to try to move the city hall, and the quid pro quo there was that if the city moved to the old Ipsy Savings Bank building, then the savings bank agreed to build a brand new structure, which they did ultimately there at Michigan between Hamilton and Adams Street. Again, a little sidelight. I mentioned to you earlier about the fact that my parents were not able to get a loan from the Ipsy Savings Bank when they attempted to build their building on Harriet Street. The irony of it all was that the president of the bank at that time was the son of the bank president, where my parents were not allowed to get a loan. I had a meeting in his office when we discussed the future of the city and whether or not we were going to be able to move the city hall and buy that building, and then they would, go up the street. And I went up into his office and we sat there and we chit-chatted and so forth. And I knew that the city really did need a new facility. And I sort of listened to them, giving me all of the business side of it. And then I sort of sat and I looked at the president at the bank and I said to him, I find it rather ironic that now you are asking me and the city council to arrange an agreement with you so that you can build another facility. Yet I gotta give you a little history of me and my family. And I gave him about a 15-minute speech about how life was then. And of course, they all just sat there red-faced because that's about the only thing they could do at that time. And the point is that I was not going to allow that to stop my thinking in terms of the fact that the city really did need to get out of that single or that 2 or 3 story building, because we didn't have an elevator. When you came to a council meeting, you had to go up that long stairway.
Right.
And a lot of the people who, needed to be at council meetings, they just simply didn't have access. So the short of it all is that I had to go on TV. I appeared on 2 or 3 of the local Detroit TV stations they used to have a segment, where if there was an issue going on in your community, you got free time, and they gave you about 45 seconds to give your spiel to why something should take place in your town. So I was able to, get some TV time and tried to convince the voters that this was a voter thing. It was not the city council decision. The council made the decision to put it on a ballot, but it still had to be voted by the citizens. So we won overwhelmingly. It was one of those majority. It was higher than a majority vote that was necessary in order to accomplish it. So the city hall moved again because of revenue sharing funds. At that time, we were able to make the move. We scheduled our payments in such a way that over a 5-year period, we were able to pay it off, and we never had to raise the taxes or anything because we were able to use our revenue sharing funds. The short of it is that during those days, and I'm talking from, basically all through the 70s, there were federal programs in addition to what had already been sent to the community that the city was able to use in terms of a lot of the things that we were able to do, both in terms of the construction projects and also buying equipment and so forth. So those were days that certainly a lot of us always thought, when we look back at it now, we just wished that the federal government would pay more attention to local government. And having spent 22 years as executive director of the Municipal League after I left my position there in the city, we're still suffering the same issues. I mean, there's more needs now than ever. The federal government has basically washed its hands. A lot of the block grant programs back in those days have dried up. They used to have money for police departments, bringing on more police officers and so forth. A lot of that money has dried up. So the whole scheme of things have changed considerably. Another observation that I want to go back to in terms of what Herbert said, when I was growing up, Harriet Street had a lot of Black businesses. The Fuller grocery store, my parents, the Blue, what was the restaurant across the Cartwrights? What was the name of that restaurant?
Was it Blue? Pat, do you remember?
Blue Haven.
Yes.
Blue Haven.
Yeah.
Don Taylor built a building there at the corner called the Place, wasn't it?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a drugstore. Mrs. Mahaley owned a bar.
Beer garden.
What was the name
The
of that?
310 bar.
It was a beer garden.
Yeah, the 310 bar. Sorry, Reverend, but the
Very lucrative.
Amos Washington owned a grocery store and a pool hall, and there was Allen's grocery store there around the corner before the intersection and stuff was built. My point simply, however, is that when you compare where we are, today, just in terms of numbers, the numbers have disappeared. I also would reflect on the fact that during the period of time that I was mayor in Ypsilanti, the state of Michigan had either the first or the second highest number of African-American mayors of all the states in the country. When you looked around all of the communities in Michigan, many of them had African-American mayors. And so again, that's starting to reassert itself in terms of what I'm seeing now. But again, it's one of these situations, I think, where we need to look back now, and I'm glad to see that you're bringing in more young people into the leadership roles in the community, because that's important. And if you're talking about succession planning and getting people ready, excuse me, that's essential in terms of who is going to be available to step up when some of us old timers are gone. Just a minute, I got to get some water here. When you think about the efforts and a lot of the issues that many of our parents went through in terms of just survival in these days, we're heads and shoulders above many of them in terms of our conditions, but we still have a lot of way. We have a long way to go. Lois, I'm gonna stop for now because my voice is going on me.
Okay,
But I
appreciate
can answer
that.
questions.
Well, we'll come back after, we're gonna hear from Pat and from Hazel, and then we'll come back and just have a conversation with
Okay.
you, Pat, and others that are here to join in. Okay, Pat, Mrs. Hornby, may we hear from you, please?
Well, I listened intently and I was pleased to do so. I remember when George was the mayor, and I remember urban renewal from a whole different side, because my grandfather, who lived in the urban renewal area, was Mrs. Dorsey's main ally. In fact, I believe he was the president of the Ypsilanti Properties Association. I believe he was Mr. Will Hardwick. And so to say that it was controversial would be a very kind way of saying that it was rugged. It was rugged. And the impact of it from the standpoint that I grew up knowing, the whole destruction of the community, to me has fallen out just as it was predicted by my grandfather and Miss Dorsey. So I appreciate hearing that. And some of the things Herbert said, I didn't really know, because I could only hear one side of it. But it's been growing up in the community. I'm not an elected official. I've never been an elected official in the city of Ypsilanti. I have, however, served on a number of committees as the city appointee. And that is a role that I think that people ought to push as well, for the good of the city and the youth, as George said. I was on the planning commission for a number of years, and that commission, or I guess it was called planning committee, had the role of for lack of a better purpose, making sure the property was used right and all over the city, and that it met the codes enforcement and so forth. That included churches. I can remember that Second Baptist came for parking lot issue back in there, as well as some of the other churches, Metropolitan. And so that was an interesting piece. And we have a role that we need to be keep governance over in that piece. And the Zoning Board of Appeals, you can't just throw up anything or change anything. And Mr. Chance, I believe your father is James Chance. Is that right? Or is that your grandfather?
My uncle, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. They're all James Chance.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to figure out which one I know. Probably your grandfather.
Mhm.
Okay, but your great grandfather still has property there, right?
Not anymore. So we had our main house on Monroe Street,
Yes,
which is no longer in the family, and then all the houses on the south side of
both
Bell Street.
sides.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
not anymore. Those are all sold to other family members now.
Okay. Well, at any rate, our point being, they were right in the middle of the urban renewal area, and your grandfather, I think, was very much involved as well, as were everybody. Most everybody on the south side at that time were homeowners. There were very few rentals. Mr. Chance had a house that did rent out rooms, especially to people who were migrating here from the south, and that's the house that's on Monroe Street. And so that served a very big part of the community. As people migrated here from the south usually and got on their feet, they might have rented a room or rented an apartment from Mr. Chance. So housing was different and home ownership was different, and most of the south side was home ownership, because that was the first thing that Black folks did when they got settled here, was they bought a piece of property, they bought a home, and they may have, it might not have been the home that they ended up with, but they bought it and they started, and maybe they added rooms and they did what they had to do, because consistently people, other relatives were migrating from Alabama, Miss Tucson, Miss Brown, and other places, and would stay with those people until they got on their feet. It was that sense of community. Mrs. Goodman's shop was a very big part of our growing up and our intellectualizing and enculturating. It was the shop for young ladies. And when prom time came or debutante's ball time came, and such as that, you'd have to go to Miss Goodman's shop to get gloves, to learn how to put the lipstick on right, to whatever. But it was a very big part of the community, and everybody knew that. And if you didn't have any money, Miss Goodman would probably give it to you free or make you come down there and work in the store at sometimes or another. But I think that I don't know what my, since I'm a substitute, Tony was supposed to be here. So I think my piece is just to say that the community, in spite of urban renewal, and probably because of urban renewal, has been a vibrant part of all that people are, because people lived in the community and believed in the community in many ways. There were, Reverend, three primary churches in my growing up years: the Second Baptist, the AME Church, Brown Chapel, and the Church of God in Christ on Hawkins Street, Mount Olive Church of God in Christ. However, they were not entities unto themselves. They fellowshiped together. They lived together. You knew if the Fries were having a singing program over at the Church of God in Christ, that everybody from all the churches would go over there, because you were going to be well entertained. Everybody went to the Brown Chapel Easter cantata that started like 6 o'clock in the morning, because that was what you did. Thanksgiving service was almost always at Second Baptist, and people congregated together. And that was the second question that was ever asked of you, besides, what is your name? Who are your people? And what church do you go to? And that was how, growing up on the South Side, I guess I would say that. I could say a lot about the schools, but I won't. And so I think I saw Hazel on here, Lois, so let Hazel talk.
I'm looking for Hazel because we're expecting Hazel to do
She was?
songs at this time. Oh, here she. Okay, Hazel, you're muted, and are you going to let us see you or no?
I'm trying to get in, but for some reason I'm having a problem with my computer today.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear
Well, we were hearing you now, but we don't now. Try again.
She's muted again.
Now. You muted yourself. Hit your unmute button. Hazel, I don't know.
I'm trying. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
You can hear me, but you can't see me, right? I've had a lot of problems with my computer this morning, and I apologize. I tried to get in earlier. I know I was supposed to be on program, but you know, the computer just didn't want to cooperate.
Well,
hi, everybody.
You're right on time.
It's good to see everyone. George, it's great to see you. And I got a chance to see a lot of people and get in with Herbert and everything, but I wasn't able to connect.
Well, you're here now, so, and you're at your place on the program, so let's have our melody.
Okay, praise the Lord. Well, we want to take you back to the 1800s and during slavery time, and we want you to let your mind go back to let's say the 1800s, and imagine our ancestors sitting on the banks of the river and talking about the possibility of freedom and singing songs of hope. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. If you get there before I do, coming for to carry me home. Tell all my friends that I'm coming to, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Lord, I know I've been changed. Lord, I know I've been changed. Lord, I know I've been changed. The angels in the heaven done signed my name. I went down to the river of Jordan. The water was chilly and cold. The water chilled my body, but the water didn't touch my soul. Hallelujah, Lord. I know I've been changed. Lord, I been changed, Lord. I know I've been changed. The angels in the heaven sign my name. The angels in the heaven sign my name. The angels in the heaven sign my name. Walk with me, Lord. And you can say with me if you want to. Walk with me. Walk with me, Lord. Walk with me while I'm on this pilgrim journey. I want Jesus to walk with me and be my friend, Lord. Be my friend. Be my friend, Lord. Be my friend. While I'm on this pilgrim journey, I want Jesus to be my friend. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Hello, Pharaoh, to let my people go. And Israel was in Egypt land. Let my people go. Pressed so hard they could not stand. Let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Hello, Pharaoh, please let my people go. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Hazel. Thank you for taking us back to the riverbank, way back where definitely our roots in this country, where they started. And I'm not gonna cry, but you know, when you think about it, for me, it just stirs up stuff on the inside. But
Yes, yes.
I do believe that God is, He is the Almighty and He is omnipotent and He knows why we had to come the way that we came.
Yes.
And I'm just grateful that He stayed with our forefathers during that time and that He is definitely still with us now. Because even as what we're going through now as a people and what we're seeing and what we're experiencing, it could be a whole lot worse.
Amen.
I think that our forefathers, the songs that Hazel sang, they were not just songs, but they were sending messages to each other.
Right.
And, okay, come on, Lord, let my people go. I'm on this pilgrim journey and it's tedious. And they weren't just talking about life's journey. They were talking about the journey that they were taking from the South to try to get from slavery, trying to get into freedom. And I really appreciate that, Hazel, appreciate the selections that you picked to bring to us today. And want to thank you. Now we're just going to open it up for conversation and maybe some questions from those that were not speakers, but want everybody to join in. And Mr. Francois, if you can join us at this time, I know you told me you would be in and out, but I hope you can come back in and join us. And before we start with the conversations, I just want to say, I was not here during the time of urban renewal in Ypsilanti. I was living in Kansas City, and I saw, and I just, my vernacular for what urban renewal did for Black communities was they came and they raped the community. They pulled out what was good, really for something that was better. But I think we're still looking for the better. They did that to a whole neighborhood. I mean, just almost from one end of the city to the other in Kansas City. And where they came through, I guess with Midtown, was through the Black community and the Black neighborhood. And the thing there was that they were going to build interstate highway. It was all back when urban renewal was back in the 60s, early 70s, back in that time. And guess when they built the highway? 2001. All that time, the land laid empty and bare. And what happened in Kansas City, and I know in here, people scattered, and that was when people began to move into West Willow and that area, which when I was in high school and school, that was a totally lily white area, and they didn't want any of us coming in anywhere near there. But after urban renewal and Blacks were displaced, many did begin to move into West Willow and Sugarbrook area. So, but Pat, I remember the other side too. And Pat's grandfather was my great uncle. And I listened to Uncle Will talk about it when I would come back to visit. So, but anyway, I wanted to open up now for the speakers just to have a conversation. And if anyone has a question, Pastor Waddles.
Yeah, I wanted to say quickly that listening to the stories and the songs and Miss Martin talking about the 1800s, we had family here at Ypsilanti in the 1800s that I wasn't aware of. The Burtons and the Banks and some Rossiters and Rickmans lived right on Adams Street. And in fact, I'm looking at one of the pictures over Mr. Goodman's shoulder, and I have to go upstairs and look in this book that my grandmother gave me to make sure that's not the same picture. But we had family that came here escaping slavery in Tennessee, moved to Indiana, and then Isaac Burton, who was the first principal of the First Ward School, which now is New Jerusalem Baptist Church, was my grandmother's grandfather's brother. And so our family history in Ypsi was unknown to me when I came here, and then a cousin made me aware of it. But the eerie thing was that Second Baptist Church, which I serve as pastor of, owned property, and we still own this property on Adams Street, where my grandmother's grandfather's brother lived. And he lived in the house that we bought and tore down to make room for other plans in the future. But it's just amazing how God brings us full circle to remind us of our history and how far we have to go, because I certainly agree. And I didn't witness urban renewal. I was a babe then, but I remember what it did, growing up in Chicago and then coming here later, seeing where things used to be. And I'm just grateful to be a part of the panel and to be on today. Thank you.
Thank you. You just never know. And Pastor Waddles, I will be calling you. The Ypsilanti Historical Library. We are, well, I say we because they've pulled me in to try to help. We want to increase the Black history presentation there at the library. So Pat, you'll be getting a call also, and George, we'll just, because they want to build up, and we're right now looking for trying to find and determine who was the oldest Black family in Ypsilanti. But we want to interview on all the families. I know the Foley family was here in the 1880s, I think, or 40s or something. And so were the Bows. I think the Bows moved here, I understand, in 1863. And the Kersey family was from the 1800s. So you're getting a call from me. Who wants to go next? And you can unmute. This is just a conversation.
Speaking of the urban renewal program, I think it's also interesting that when you look now at the issue that the city has faced with regard to all that empty property on Michigan Avenue, if you just go back to the urban renewal project, that triangle piece of property that was a manufacturing company, I'm not quite sure what it is right now, but that
it's
property.
A wine warehouse.
A what?
A wine warehouse.
Okay, well, that property sat empty for just about the full time of my time in office, because we were never able to get the hotel development that had originally been planned as a part of the program. And we had probably a half a dozen developers that came in with the idea of building in that particular location, but it never happened. And I think, again, the issue as it relates to programs like urban renewal, for many people, it ended up being urban removal, because what happened in so many instances is what started off as supposedly a good idea, when you measure it in terms of the historical timeline, it never really ultimately achieved the objective where it originally started. And I think when you go now in the neighborhoods, there are a lot of homes now that are still there, and there are a lot of other homes that have been, infilled and so forth. But in terms of the values, and in terms of property and opportunities that have been made, I think it's still questionable as we look back at it now, was in fact that program, from the federal government standpoint, could you really be, would you be able to evaluate it as being a successful program? And I think the issues in terms of the pros and the cons of it are still questionable in terms of its, ultimate outcome.
I agree with you on that.
We've got some folks in the attendees list with their hands up too. I don't know if Mr. Hellinger can snag them.
He has the controls, so.
Hello, good afternoon. Lamar Weir calling in from Congresswoman Dingell's office. New to the Ypsilanti area. Don't live here, but now work in this area. And I want to know, is there, some type of formal Black history artifacts or some type of encyclopedia for Ypsilanti that captures all of the information regarding the Black community, because the storytelling was very powerful, but there aren't a lot of people that may have know these stories, and as time goes on, less and less people know these stories. So is it documented anywhere so that it can live much longer and forever?
Lois, I wanted
Yes,
to
Pat.
speak to that a minute.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm now on the library board, and our library, our Ypsilanti library, our very fine Ypsilanti library, has a collection that is the AP Marshall collection. That is probably as close as we're going to get to an encyclopedia of that. But around that collection, there are other pieces that speak to documents, some historical documents and so forth that are part of that collection, or that serve with that collection, that can be used to remember or to become acquainted with that. I'm not sure that there's a lot of anything that's documented. That wasn't our way. If you look at the history of Second Baptist Church or Brown Chapel AME Church, you will find a lot of these things documented in there, because the people in the churches were very much involved in the community affairs, such as the urban renewal, the recreation department, and so forth. So you have to do a little bit of work, Lamar, but it is there. I put the library up for you with the AP Marshall collection. In fact, Mr. AP Marshall was a university librarian at Eastern Michigan and was a very devout member of Brown Chapel AME Church, and brought that his work to the church and thus to the community as he found all of this stuff.
There's also the South Adams Street project too that you can look at, and that's online.
There was a recent publication also, and his name was Matt. I'm trying to remember the last name, but Matt pulled together a number of stories. Is that Seagree? Is that the Adams Street? Is that what he called the Adams Street project?
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and Lamar, if you were on when I mentioned, I would be calling on George, Pat, and Pastor Waddles. His Ypsilanti Historical Library, museum is working on trying to pull together and make concrete, put in a concrete way some of the stories that we heard today. So, and one of the things you need to do is just maybe grab 2 or 3 people that have lived here or there or all their lives or close to all their lives, that grew up here from back in the day, and talk to them. And one thing about the people in Ypsilanti that I have learned over the years is that we are a friendly bunch. And all I do is give us a chance and talking, right, Pat? Right, George?
Right.
Of course.
So
I also just want to mention Eastern Michigan in light of the people and I'm thinking particularly of Mr. Beatty, Charles Eugene Beatty. He is a Hall of Fame, Eastern Michigan Hall of Fame representative twice. Yeah. Once for athletics, go look at it and see, and once for education. And I think if you want to know the history of this area, then you've got to be up on him. Of course, I could tell you, but I'm not. Go do the work.
Also, you might want to, I had called his son. Mr. Jesse Rutherford was the first African-American, or I choose to use Black. I identify as Black rather than African-American, but he was the first Black director of recreation, I believe, in the city. And George, am I correct on that?
Yep, he was the first and only.
Yes. Well,
yeah,
no.
That's right. He was the first director there at Park Ridge, and actually again, another historical note, my mother was on the committee that hired Jesse Rutherford to that position.
And your mother was also a member of the club that started Carver Community Center. I don't know if it was, I think I worked for Carver Neighborhood Center, Carver Community Center, which was started by the Palm Leaf Club of Ypsilanti.
Mhm.
And that turned into what we know as Park Ridge Community Center today. So the city took it over and changed the name. So Lamar, does that give you a little bit more to go search out?
That does. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Also,
You're welcome.
don't forget the Perry family as it relates to their
Absolutely.
role, and Dr. Bass and
Yes.
Mrs. Bass, the whole Bass family. Well, all of the Bass family could give you some very, very interesting history about you know, the early days in the city of Ypsilanti. Dr. Perry used to have that office there at the corner of Hamilton and
Buffalo. Was that Buffalo
Buffalo.
or Catherine? Catherine. No, Buffalo.
No, Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Dr. Perry was our family dentist.
Yes.
I mentioned this to you earlier, but Dr. Bass's first office was where the Ypsilanti Housing Project's administrative office is,
Right.
before they built the office there at the corner of Hamilton and what is
Catherine.
it?
Woodward. Was
Catherine?
that Woodward?
Woodward, yes. Woodward, yes.
Woodward, yeah.
Yes.
And Patsy Chandler used to have
Yes.
her after her Chandler Teas to raise
Yeah.
money for the well, she raised money for different projects, but she raised money for the fountain
Yes.
that the
Yes.
city built ultimately there where the old library used to be on
Right.
Michigan. Is that still there?
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
it is.
Okay.
It's still library, yes. Yes.
I
So,
was also going to mention, Pat, does the Ipsy library, I think these regional libraries now must have a relationship, but I saw recently where some information about the early African-American history is also available at the Ann Arbor, it's either the library or the Washtenaw County Historical Society.
Well, I think it's at the library in Ann Arbor, but it travels. So it is also available at the Ypsilanti District Library.
Yeah.
But they did a lot of oral histories. Ann Arbor did most of them. So, and they're viewed from time to time of pioneers in the area, both Ann Arbor and Ipsy. Because if you can remember, basically many of the people in Ann Arbor started in Ypsilanti, and so the history is mixed.
Right.
You know, yes. So it is available, and that's another resource.
all right, I see Mr. Raymond Mullins was moved up to panelist, and I understand there are 3 other hands that are raised. So Chelsea, you're our host now, so would you allow Mr. Mullins to speak and then go to the successive hands, please? Thank you.
He's unmuted.
Mullins.
Can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay, well, I've been wrestling with my computer and I've been trying to get my face on it, and I don't know if you can see me or not. I just don't know, but
we can't see you, but can you see us?
No, you can see me?
No,
No.
we can't see you. Okay.
But you can
We can
me.
hear you though.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my computer is touched by the devil and is not allowing users. But I can see you, especially, I don't know if there's a panoply of everybody, but when they speak, I can see them, and I can see a bunch of old people that I seem to remember.
All right, Raymond.
Huh?
All right, Raymond.
It's good we can't see you. It's good we can't see you.
Well,
you were old.
And by the way, you speak for yourself, Ray.
Amen.
but I don't know what's happening. I think my computer is possessed, but it's really been a lot of fun listening to George and other people from the south side of Ypsilanti.
Yes.
And it brings a lot of good memories to me as a child. I grew up there, and you know, my mom was a teacher. I don't know if any of you had her.
I did.
Did you?
I did. And your aunt, Valdez.
Oh, Marie, yeah, okay,
Yes.
yes, Marie. Yeah, she passed away about 10 years ago. She moved back down to Florida.
Oh.
And you know, I grew up on the south side, and there's so many great memories of all the people. Some of them have left us, and it's really a lot of good memories. Perhaps next time we do this, I hope we do it again. I hope my computer will you know, assist me. But I have great memories about with Dr. Bass and the NAACP. When I first joined, he was the president. And subsequently, as the years passed, I became president of the NAACP, and I'm proud to say that we had one of the best branches in the nation. And during the 1980s, I guess it would be, in the 90s, we were really rolling, and we took a lot of young people to the national convention, and we got awarded by the National Association, and we were very active down there on Harriet Street, and so I'm very pleased with that. Hopefully, you know, we can be able to do this again or something, and you see a panoply of all the people who are participating. But it's been a lot of fun, and I hope that this episode will not, you know, be the only one, and we can still communicate. There are a lot of good memories. There are a lot of people who have passed on.
Yes.
But on the other hand, we have, you know, we have a lot of memories, and Ypsilanti, compared to a lot of other cities, is still here. It's really sad that the four car manufacturing plants left the area. And because I was president of the NAACP in the 1980s, I guess it was, and they were actually coming to the NAACP office to recruit employees. You know, we got them to come there because we wanted to have more African-American people employed. We had a mixed bag, but we had a good group of Blacks that would come right down to our neighborhood and get employed. It's a delight to see all of you. I was trying to get a hold of George, and maybe after this, George, if you can give me a call, I would like to talk with you after this program when you get a chance. My number is 734-485-7515, but I would love to chat with you after the program about some things that are happening. You know, this is a lot of fun, and I enjoy this, and I enjoy seeing the people that I grew up with. And thank you. I don't want to filibuster too much, but I am here, and you say you can see me. I can't see me seeing me. I don't know what's happening.
Thanks, Raymond. And one of the things that, oh, I'm sorry, George needs you to give it your.
What was your number, Ray?
My phone number is 734-485-7515.
Okay.
And I was trying to get a hold of you 2 or 3 weeks ago, but if you can give me a call sometime after this the program, I would like to talk with you. There's a lot of great memories. Certainly, there's a lot of sadness, but on the other hand, there was a lot of great memories.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Bass and I really got to be buddies, and we went to several events with the NAACP down in DC, and also the national convention. I think it was in Houston, and he was my roommate, the Omega Man and the Alpha Man. And I got to know him differently from when I first met him. When I first met him, you know, my first thing that I remember about Dr. Bass is I fell. My mother took me up to the office up there in Park Ridge. That's where his medical office was. And I'll take this to the grave. And what happened is that he says, well, we got to give him a shot, you know, what do you call it, shot, you know. And I remember Dr. Bass coming toward me with this needle that was as big as a horse. And he wanted to shoot me in my thigh. And I was, wow! But that's a great memory. But Dr. Bass, the Alpha, and me, the Q, we were great friends. And as long as he lived, I will never forget his friendship. Occasionally I contact his son, Michael. But hopefully we can do something more often with people who are active in the city during the early days, 70s, 80s, 90s. And like that. Thank you very much. I don't want to filibuster too much. It would be nice if I could see you seeing me see you, but I have been able to see you, and you all look great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate you coming on. And Mr. Jones-Chance and Mayor Pro Tem and I, we have briefly talked about doing something like this as often as once a quarter. So at least while we're in office, and when we're out, hopefully if we get it going, we be able to keep it up. So, but there's some other hands that I want to try to get to all the hands that are up. Chelsea, could you promote the next hand, please? Okay, I see Michelle. Michelle, can you unmute yourself and tell us who you are? Michelle, you need to unmute. Chelsea, we can't see her. If you can, if she's speaking, can you let her know, or can you unmute her? There you go. Thank you.
Hey, see me? Okay.
Barely, yes.
Okay. Michelle, I'm Diana. So I don't know what we were doing, but I couldn't get a picture of her. So I'm gonna let my mom talk.
Michelle, we're having real difficulty hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Are you speaking?
Lois, this is Diana Kersey Spencer. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm in Friendswood, Texas, and I have enjoyed watching this segment. I remember you, of course, George, and Hazel, and Pat.
Hi.
I was born in Ann Arbor and raised on First Avenue. And then moved to Second Avenue. I went to school with George at Roosevelt, and the Taylor kids and Peggy,
yes,
my cousin. We would all walk to school together, rain or shine or sleet or snow.
yes.
And I went to, I was a member of Brown Chapel, and remember all the Easter cantatas and the, for Christmas, our Christmas program, and Mary Louise Foley.
Yes.
And how she was our Sunday school teacher. I have great memories of Ypsilanti. I enjoyed growing up there. After I became aware of different things, I knew there was prejudice there, but as far as, well, I remember going to the Worth Theater and having to go.
Yes, we all do.
Then the Martha Washington came in, and we were all able to sit on the same floor. I mean, in the same area. And I remember the Dixie Shop.
Yes.
And going in there and having people follow you around. Because Peggy and I like to shop. So we would go down there, and then sometimes we'd get on the bus and go to Detroit. But then I also remember Terry's Bakery, and Cass was in our class at Roosevelt, and we were always welcome in the bakery.
Mhm.
But I have real fond memories, and we lived in Ypsi till 1981, and then we moved to Texas. Bob, my brother, has passed away, and Paulette, my sister, has passed away. So is mom and dad, Flick and Geraldine Kersey.
Yes.
But I do have very, very, very fond memories of it.
Mhm.
I loved it there, and it's been enjoyable seeing and hearing everybody. So I shall say goodbye now. See you soon.
I just realized who you are. I'm looking at the name. It says
Yes.
Michelle, and I was.
Now, Michelle is my daughter.
But you're Diana.
Diane.
Yes.
Diane, yes.
Kersey. Yeah.
So I'm so glad to hear your voice. So glad.
I can see you, Lois, but you can't see me.
I know. I will get your number from Roz and give you a call so we can.
Okay, that would be great. That would be
Okay.
great.
Diane, it's good to hear from you, Diane.
Hi, George.
Hi,
How are ya?
Diane.
Hi, everybody.
It's so good to hear from you, Diane.
Yes, when we come home, we're usually at my home on Second Avenue.
Second Avenue.
And I just get to see relatives. Sometimes I'll see other people, but we have had Kersey reunions.
Yeah.
And it's been nice to see a lot of people there. So love everybody.
Love you too, Diane. So glad you joined in.
Yeah,
This was
good to hear
fun.
from
This
you.
was fun.
Yes. Okay, Chelsea, do we have another hand or two? We're getting close to our end time, but if I want to make sure anybody that has their hand up, we will hear from them.
Raymond Mullins, he has his hands up. One moment.
I didn't hear you, Chelsea.
You mentioned Raymond, but he's been on already.
Raymond, so is
Yeah.
another, I still see the hand up.
Lois, while we're waiting, I wanted to
Yes.
also mention to the group, let's not forget the Clark family.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Clark
Dr.
and
Clark.
Sam Clark and Leo Clark, who later was principal there at Perry Child Development. Mrs. Clark, Hattie Clark, was my
Yes.
Sunday school superintendent at Brown Chapel.
Wow.
Mrs. Clark told me the first time I was elected to the city council, I went to a Patsy Chandler tea one Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Clark said to me, the only advice I can give you is that if you are never criticized, it means that you're not doing anything.
Good advice.
And
That's
that has
good
stuck
to
with
know.
me all my life.
That's good. That is good to know, Pastor Waddle. And I should say, you mentioned the Clark family. I am alive today because of Dr. Clark. I had,
Me too.
they told me the story over and over again, how at 3 years of age, I had pneumonia with a temperature 105 and rising, and Dr. Clark, he had delivered me, and his wife, they kind of kept me close, but anyway, he came and sat with me. They were making house calls back then, and I was always told the story how he sat with me until all night. And I think finally about 6 or 7 in the morning, he got my temperature to break and told my mother I'd be okay. And he went on home, and here I sit now, a whole bunch of years later. But anyway, the Clark family played a big part in the city of Ypsilanti. And I see the Beards have been, am I saying your name correctly?
So we haven't figured out how to change my name. This is Jim Mogensen.
Oh,
And my
okay. Hi,
wife, my
Jim.
wife, Rachel, and I work on REROC and other things, Poor People's Campaign. And I'm very interested in racial and economic justice. And I know about this because I got the link from Pastor Harold. So one thing I wanted to do as we follow up on this has been very fascinating. There was a time in which I lived recently at Chittister Place, and I live in Ann Arbor now. But I'm very interested in this dynamic. Of course, the urban renewal was a federal program, but it had impact. I knew Robert Potts, who was the Model Cities person in the city of Ann Arbor. And so there are these dynamics, not only internally within each of the cities, but also at a county level. And so as we move forward, getting the history of each of the different communities, and then how each of those communities interact with each other, and how some of those dynamics and racial dynamics have impacted things, because I think it influences also what's happening on the 23 divide and the number of those things. And I think I had heard that some of the folks that with the Model Cities program in Ann Arbor, some of those folks, has been mentioned earlier, moved to Ypsilanti. And some of that
The other way around.
It was the other way around. They moved from Ipsy to Ann Arbor.
Yes.
And then there was that. Right, there's those dynamics. Anyway, I'm interested
in fact, to work more than anything else.
Right.
I worked for Model Cities, but I never moved to Ann Arbor.
Okay. You knew everybody. Anyway, my point is, I moved to this area in 1992, so I don't know a lot of the history, but I try to follow what's going on. And so it's very interesting to me to understand some of those things, because some of these structures have history behind them, in terms of understanding, and particularly in the 80s when some of that was happening. And so anyway, so I hope to be able to follow up and check in with folks so I can understand what's really going on. And so I have some idea on some of that history, because I think it matters as things are moving forward. Because what it used to be urban renewal, and there's always some other new plan, right? So I'm always interested in doing that. So I look forward to working with folks so we can understand that and to make sure that as things move forward, some of those dynamics, if there were unhealthy dynamics that were happening, that we can try to mitigate some of that, and so there's some justice going on. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate that, your comments. Yes. Thank you for jumping on and joining us. Okay. Chelsea, do we have any other hands?
No one else.
No one else.
Besides Raymond Mullins again.
Okay, no, we've heard from Ray. All right, we're going to try to, we should have a song from the high school group. So please, Chelsea, if you could put that on for us. Thank you.
Over my head, I see trouble in the air. Over my head, I see trouble in the air.
Crystal. Thank you, Crystal, and the choir.
Great.
We appreciate that.
Wow.
Yes, yes, yes. So now we're going to have remarks from, we're a little bit over time, but remarks from starting with Mr. Jones Chance, the newest representative for Ward 1.
Oh, yeah, it's, I'm glad that we did this, and as Mrs. Richardson was mentioning, I do think it would be good to do this maybe once a quarter. I think it highlights a lot of the things that we've started to work on, addressing some of the, particularly some of the zoning issues around kind of the remnants of urban renewal, and seeing what we can fix. And it's good to hear this kind of conversation because, you know, some of us who either grew up in the ward or in the neighborhood or can remember it, have that context. But when we're working on sort of community efforts, it's good for the rest of the city to get the context and get a glimpse of what we see. And, you know, as it was mentioned, yeah, my family has a long history in town, the Chances and the Campbells and the Knoxes. So I'm glad we're still a part of the community, and I hope I can be of use going forward.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yeah, thank you all. I share a lot of the same sentiments as Mr. Jones Chance, but you know, I think we hear this a lot, but this has really, again, lifted the fact that, you know, Black history is American history, and we can't forget that. And so in Ypsilanti in particular, we see that the roots of our Black history really help to mold and shape this community. And as a young person serving in this capacity, hearing from folks who came before me around what happened, the changes, the things that we wanted, the things that we didn't, in particular talking about urban renewal has been really helpful and really beneficial to me as an individual serving in this capacity now, to be able to work alongside Mayor Richardson and Mr. Jones Chance, I'm sorry, to continue to kind of fix and right some of the wrongs that have happened in the ward, but in the greater community at large as well. And so I do look forward to having additional conversations around this and more presentations, and making sure that we're gathering these stories and this historical information so that, kind of like Mr. Weir asked about earlier, we have many ways and many outlets to continue to keep these stories alive and keep this information in places that are accessible to those coming after us and after me. I too have family that has history here. The Tucson family has been here for quite a while as well, and rooted and very committed to this community. And so I hope to continue to just add and contribute my efforts to keeping our community vibrant and alive, and building that sense of community that I hear so much about that existed, you know, prior to me. And so thank you all again for your time. And I just really enjoyed listening and participating in this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Brown and Mr. Chance. I just want to say in closing out, a great big thank you to Mrs. Horn McGee, to Mr. Herbert Francois II, and to the former Mayor George Goodman. You know, it's nice to have people and friends that you can call up on that will step up to the plate. And you all really, really hit some home runs today. I really appreciate your coming on. I appreciate the conversation. And Pastor Waddles, thank you so much for that prayer and for that bit of history. And also my good friend Hazel. Thank you so much, Hazel. And cannot escape thanking Mrs. Harding. Thank you for all that you do with the youth. And I'm so used to you working with the children from Erickson, and I don't know if they were from all over at one point, I think, in the schools, but that's why I was thinking it was still the Erickson's children's choir. But the Ypsi High School choir, they did fantastic. Thank you for the work that you're doing with them. And I do know, Ms. Harding, I got an email on yesterday from, or day before, from Dr. Zachary Ross saying that she was going to be watching today. So she can see what you're doing with the kids. Thank you. I just want to wish everybody, oh gosh, safety, wellness, and wholeness, and as we move on. And again, as I mentioned, that we have talked about it, and we're going to begin to, the three of us try together sometime weekly. So we will be making more plans to have events like this. And if we can, we'll be calling on you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And you know, some things like this, you just don't want to see them in, but I guess I need to let y'all go. So all I got to say is thank you. And thank you to everyone that joined us. I think at one time we had maybe about 35 people more than that participating that we couldn't see or hear. So just thank you and enjoy the weekend. And if you can, get out, enjoy some of the sun. Mr. Goodman's where he has sun every day, you know. He knows Michigan well enough to know that usually February can be kind of cloudy and gloomy. But anyway, appreciate you all and thanks again. Thanks to Chelsea and also to Andrew for setting this up for us. Have a good one.
Thank you. You too. Good to see you, George Donald.